Okay, I cleaned the lens off. Hopefully that'll improve my ability to see if it's in focus. I think it might work. Okay. Now this, let me see. Yeah, I'm in the right size range. If I was able to do the fluting, I could have just trimmed back these ears and I would have been in the right size range. So that's good to know. Now I've got a foreshaft. This is the average foreshaft as far as I can tell. 7/16 diameter is about average for foreshafts. As long as it fits in there, I'm good. And I haven't found all my hafting material. I had some black modeling clay. Okay, here it is. This I'm going to use to substitute or to simulate hafting glue. Who'd have thought that they made modeling clay in black, right? With the heat of the shop, it's already very easy to work. I'm going to use this in place of hafting glue just to demonstrate what it looks like hafted. Okay. Very good. I thought I had lost that batch. All right. So I'm gonna haft it up after I do this. So you can see it is plausible to have it as an lateral dart point. Okay, and not an arrow point. You know what I'm saying? And it's going to be thick. I think there's some debate whether Clovis or Folsom was exclusively an lateral dart point. 12,000 years ago is not that long ago. There were presumably bows and arrows in existence at that date. Now, whether they were in existence at that date in the Americas is up for debate. Now, one of the things that supports the argument that it may have been in the New World from the very beginning is these small points, these small Folsom and Clovis points. I got a long ways to go, don't I? Yeah, I only need half this much. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to flute first and then shape later. Okay. So if I mess up, I can flute several times on this long piece. Oh yeah. Okay. Now we're cooking with gas. As one of my old shop teachers, or one of my old drafting teachers, used to say, now we're cooking with gas. I think I can get this done. Where's my... Let's see how this feels. Not too much different from the raw stone, except I don't have to put nearly as much pressure. See if I can drive something here. I can feel that bending. I can snap that. I can snap this off easily. I felt it bending. Yeah, I can feel this antler bending. But I just want to see if I could drive some flakes. And yeah, with heat treat, it's much easier to drive the flakes. And why do I mention that I can feel this bending? It's because I don't want to break the tool. If I have to put too much pressure on, I'm going to stop using it for this particular strategy here. I don't want to break my tools, and neither did they back in the day. How do I know they didn't want to break their tools back in the day? Because it's really, really frustrating. Especially when you have to make your tools by grinding and chipping and cutting with stone tools. It takes forever. How do you make something like this with stone tools? Well, first you got to cut this little piece with a stone axe or something, or a chopper or whatever. Cut out this piece, and then you drill it out. Shape it by grinding this on the stone, right? Shaping this little angle. And then the antler, you have to cut it with a stone. First you cut a section out of the antler, then you cut it lengthwise to break off this piece, so you get like a rectangular cross-section piece. And then you grind it on another stone until it's round, and then you insert it into the hole you drilled, provided you did not break off your stone drill in the hole, because then you got to toss it, get another piece. You can't with, I don't know, maybe you can pull out that stone with some sort of natural tool, but it's hard enough to pull out a stone that's broken down in the hole when you're trying to drill with a stone drill. If you break it down in the hole, it's hard enough trying to pull it out with modern tools. I don't know how you would pull that out with natural material, so you have to toss this and start over. That's why it's a pain in the butt. You don't want to break your tools when you're using natural materials. You have to take care of your tools. And is napping on raw stone taking care of your tools? No, I don't think so. I think you're just asking for trouble. Now, can I blast through that? No, probably not. I could try to do an indirect percussion flake and blast through that. I might have to, but I don't want to. That's a little bit easier to blast through. All right. Yeah, it's a little bit of a drastic gouge there. Let me see. What I'm looking for is I'm trying to judge whether I can take another flake here for a double thinning flake without snapping the whole thing. I may have to thin it down at the tip a little more, even though I'm going to lose a lot of that tip. Thin it down just so it reduces the risk of snapping. There's a lot of mass near the tip right now. And like I said, if this has to go to part 18, 19, or 20 to get the small Clovis done, I'll do it. Okay. Now, is this more difficult than a large Clovis? Apparently it is. I'm feeling like it is. Isn't that rather strange? Yep. It is rather strange. Now, is that small Clovis a repurposed tip? Well, it could be, yes. But it still doesn't detract away from it being difficult. It's still difficult. Just because you're working with a tip. Like if you're working with, let's see. I got a broken tip out here somewhere. It's a little bit too big, but you get the idea. If you repurpose a broken tip, it's still going to be difficult because it's small. I want to get a wide, flat flake, long. We'll see. You may have to close your eyes and hope for the best. Why am I not taking my time? Because if I take my time, I think too much. All I'm trying to do is thin it down. It shouldn't be that hard. Flutes are just simply thinning flakes. It's not that big a deal unless you make it a big deal. Many of us have been drilled, had the information drilled into our heads that flute is something special, and it's not. It's just a thinning flake. It's a very specific thinning flake. It's not anything special. It's just specifically done at the base. And there's certain problems to overcome when you're hitting on the base. You have to overcome the problem of snapping in the middle, which you see a lot of that in the archaeological record. They did mess these up. When you flute over a flute, it gets easier. The second flake over that flat area is actually easier than the first. The problem is it gets way too thin. See, it's already going to be very loose in the haft, but I mean that doesn't matter too much. But Clovises, as far as their cross sections, are usually thick, right, for their width. Now, I don't know what the ratio is on this. I could calculate the width to thickness ratio on this, but it looks fairly thick compared to the width. It looks like a 5-to-1 to me. Just a guess. So this next flake, it just needs to be wide and flat. I don't even think they went anywhere. Let's try isolating. Since I've got plenty of room, if I mess it up, I can try again. I'll try isolating. It's not that good of a job, huh? Okay. Good enough. I think I'm having the same issue. I think I'm just afraid to snap the whole thing. Anyway. That's going to have to be good enough. Yeah, it's not going to be all the way up. It's going to be like a regular Clovis, about halfway up. All right. I am kind of in a hurry too. See, what time is it? I don't know. I still got some time. Okay. So this is going to be a lot of boring pressure flaking. Let's see if I can think of another topic that would get some people riled up. Get me some more of those dislikes. The ones that no one ever seems to expand on. They give me a dislike, but they don't expand on it. Of course, it's the other way too. A lot of people like the videos, but they don't tell me why. Either way is okay. I don't care. Anyway, what to talk about while I'm doing this? I've got two other channels that I have not posted on in several months. And one of the issues that I had, especially with the Patrick Blank channel, was that I was discussing narcissism and science, right? Now, I said narcissists can't do science. After I made that video, I said to myself, you know, I really don't know all that much about narcissism. I just know some of the effects. And I've known plenty of people that are narcissistic. Let's do some research. Alright, so I did research and more research and more research. I have been doing nothing but listening to psychology and philosophy books since that time, just to get familiar with narcissism and making sure that I've got it right. And opened a can of worms, basically, because now that I know what to look for, what the signs are for people who have a difficult relationship with reality, I'm seeing it everywhere. I'm seeing that there are people, and the field of archaeology seems to be infested with a lot of narcissistic attitudes, that it just is starting to get depressing. Right? I mean, I was thinking, something's not right here. Now that I know how to recognize the symptoms, these symptoms are all over the place. Difficult relationship with reality, inability to accept or withstand or tolerate criticism, ignoring contrary evidence in favor of supporting evidence, messing with definitions, redefining, terms, abusing language. I'll get into all that on that other channel. It's just amazing all the things that mental illness can actually do to research, and there's nothing being done about it. That's the problem. There are very capable, very intelligent people with mental illness that are extremely active in archaeology. No one says anything, right? Because you can't really say anything if it's a medical condition. You don't have a license to practice medicine. You start saying stuff, get you into hot water, right? So no one says anything. But the signs are there. There is mental illness messing with the field of napping and archaeology. And I'm going to have to tread lightly, but I plan on expanding on that so that I can show how to wade through the trash and get to the good stuff. And learn to spot errors. You can spot errors, even though, most of us that are not involved in the field of archaeology are pretty ignorant, right? And myself included, on the techniques and the procedures of how they go about coming up with their theories. It will take years to catch up. But us as amateur experimental archaeologists still can get into the conversation simply based on our knowledge of logic and spotting contradictions and using reason to criticize some of these hypotheses that they're coming up with. Obviously, if you can spot a contradiction in a hypothesis or in a line of reasoning, something's not right. You don't have to know a lot about archaeology to know that the logic is just not flowing. There's leaps of logic there, either intentional or unintentional. And yes, there are intentional leaps of logic if the particular subject is being politicized. There's usually leaps of logic and all that, because a lot of times reality is just something that people don't want to face, so they have to come up with a rhetoric that supports what they think is reality and blah blah blah, that kind of thing. We have to watch out for that, and we can spot it with analyzing the logic of the whole thing. Okay, so that's what I'll be getting into. It would take me years to catch up to the knowledge that I need to criticize it simply based on archaeology. some of these articles that I've been reading. But I can spot the errors in logic right away. And believe me, there are many errors in logic. And I've gone back and looked at some of the papers that I used to think were pretty cool, and I go, oh man, they're missing a lot of. They're missing a lot of opportunities to go into why something is not the case. They're explaining why something is the case all the time. Support for their hypothesis. That's all they do. Support for this, support for that. One of the things you learn in philosophy is something called epistemology, which is the philosophy of knowledge or something, right? How to gather knowledge, how to increase knowledge and progress. Knowledge is progressed through criticism. Bottom line, right? Bottom line, knowledge is progressed through criticism, because that in that way you can improve your hypothesis. Supporting evidence doesn't really improve on your hypothesis. It just improves on the amount of paper you have to back up your hypothesis. And the weight of that paper seems to be the important thing these days. That's not science. That's how you progress in something that's pseudoscience, something like astrology, right? You can amass mountains of paper showing how astrology is accurate. We've got millions of Capricorns or millions of Libras that have personalities that match their sign, their zodiac sign, perfectly. Look at this mountain of evidence we have for Libras that match their sign perfectly. And they keep amassing more and more and more of this stuff, thinking that that's improving their position in astrology, when we all know you're missing the cases where that's not the case. What about all the people that don't fall into these categories, where the horoscopes are totally wrong? Oh no, don't worry about that. We've got mountains of evidence to support that our predictions on your personality from your birth sign are correct. Our predictions are correct, and we have mountains of evidence. If you're a researcher and you're proceeding in that way, you're proceeding the same way as those who propose the validity of astrology. It's not science. Sorry to say. Okay. All right, we'll finish it up on the next segment. All right, I'm just going to nap it down. Nap it down to size. Okay. With a pressure flaker. I'm just going to pressure flake this down to size, and if I see an opportunity to take a nice wide, bold flake, I'll do it. Otherwise, let's see. I really should have this open to that page so I don't have to keep flipping. but I just can't do all these things at once. All right. And it does matter that I get the size just right. I didn't get the flute just right, or the thinning flakes or whatever. I could still drive one, but then it starts to get too thin. I got a lot to remove off the tip. I'm just going to leave the tip long like this for time's sake. You might ask, what am I trying to do? I'm trying to make it look like I did this in 3 minutes. I'm taking 15 minutes to make it look like I did it in 3 minutes. I'm trying to figure out how to place these bold flakes with the pressure flaker. So I'm really not used to creating bold flakes with pressure. I'm used to creating those little bitty flakes, and I want to do it with pressure because it's faster. I want to wrap this up. I may have just messed that up. Yeah, it seems like when I want to do a flake, extremely important flake, those are the ones I mess up. And I'm sure a lot of you guys are in the same boat. It's one of those things that even if you have lots of experience, you never quite get over that. There's always that specter of the flake that must come off correctly will not come off correctly. There's always that possibility, no matter how much experience you have. All right. I don't know how good that looks. Anyway, I really need to do a lot more napping off camera to keep in practice. Yeah, I need to do this a lot more often. Let's see how close I am. I'm probably more narrow now. Oh, I'm okay. I'm okay on the narrowness. All right, thickness. Come on. Yeah, I guess. All right. I'm just barely there on the narrowness. You know, I go any more narrow than this and I've ruined it. So I just need to grind it. Okay, so the reason why I wanted to show you the point hafted is because it is reasonable to assume that you could put this on an average size Atlatl dart, 4-shaft. Okay? It is reasonable to assume that it can go onto a normal size Atlatl dart 4-shaft. All right. Which I think that's what they did, right? I do think that they used very small Clovis points for Atlatl darts and not for arrows, although this could go on an arrow 4-shaft easily. Yeah, it's as thin as an arrow point. Definitely smaller than a known arrow point. Why not put it on an arrow? The key is the size of the hafting area. See the size of the neck on here? This is the hafting area. All right, it'll fit on something like this. You can tell by the hafting, the width of the stem, the hafting area and the width of the stem. It would be foolish to put this on that, on a stem this small. To haft a stem of this size onto a 4-shaft tip this small. Right? It can be done. It could be done, right? You could definitely do it, but you can also justify doing it on this. All you need is a small surface area or a small edge area to effectively cut into a hide or to puncture a hide. Okay. To get into the internal organs of the animal. Okay. So this is just simulating the glue. I got to make sure there's plenty of glue in the transition. For those of you just tuning in, this is not actual glue. This is black modeling clay to simulate glue for the video. Normally, you would apply hot melt, but not with your fingers, with a stick or something. You can touch the hot melt with your fingers. If you dip your fingers in water, you can touch and dab and do a fairly good job of smoothing it while it's still hot with your fingers if you dip your fingers in water. So we're all going to pretend that I'm using a hot melt like a pine pitch glue. I don't think there's much evidence to support that the Native Americans used birch tar, but they might have. Most of the time you see them using asphaltum or pine resin. This is just black modeling clay to illustrate. Okay. For illustration purposes only. Alright. I spin it like this to see if the very tip, it doesn't move. It looks okay. Now I think there is I think there's a good reason to believe that Clovis was hafted with plant fiber, so I'm going to use thread instead of artificial sinew or something to simulate sinew. I'm using thread to imitate plant fiber all the way up to where the grinding stops. Now why plant fiber? Because I'm doing this tightly, right? If this was sharp, like up here, it would snap the plant fiber. Or the bast, whatever you're using. If it's plant-based, you have to wrap it tight because it does not shrink like sinew does. Now, could they have been using sinew? Yes, they could have. But why would they need to grind it? Why would they need to grind the edges when we know from experience as experimental archaeologists, as amateur, I shouldn't even say that, but as amateur experimental people, we know that we don't need to grind the edges when using sinew. The sinew will not cut. But plant fiber does, because we have to keep it tight, and if that edge is sharp and we're using a lot of force to keep it tight, it's going to cut the plant fiber. Okay. Let me see. What did I do with the glue? This was probably covered over with glue anyway, so let's just do that. We're just going to pretend we're covering the whole thing with glue. Why would you cover everything over with glue afterwards? To keep it waterproof. Why do you need a waterproof? Well, you don't really, technically, but if you are hunting in wet weather conditions, you don't want anything to come loose. And you can definitely fire an atlatl dart in wet weather. That's one of the good things about it. You don't have a bowstring that gets ruined by wet weather. The atlatl and dart can both be made waterproof. Where in archery, it's hard to do that with a bow and arrow. Bows are fair weather weapons. Okay, so here we go. For the most part, some of you guys are very good at waterproofing. I suppose you could justify the position that, oh no, you can waterproof the arrow and the bowstring for hunting in rainy weather. Okay, fine. With natural materials, don't forget. Okay, fine. I'm just placing my bets. I'll bet that atlatl dart and atlatl are much better in rainy weather. Okay, so there you go. That's what a small mini Clovis would look like hafted. You could probably sand that wood down more to make that transition better. But even with just that, I think it would still penetrate well. With a lot of power behind it. Darts have a lot of power, a lot of kinetic energy because of their weight. That would definitely pierce a hide. And with the smooth transition, even though it's kind of bulky, the important thing is a smooth transition using that glue. And then when you cover the whole thing with glue, it also smoothens it out. But yeah, I could improve on this by taking more off the wood so that it's not as wide. But anyway, there you go. So my opinion on mini Clovis is that they were used for atlatl darts. That's where I would place my bets. And I went ahead and demonstrated the hafting of it just to illustrate the point. I guess pun intended. All right. There you go. That's it.